Ditto.
I think we're striving for irony here. I really hope you guys like me, but we'll get to that later.
I mean, I'm happy to facilitate sometimes, Laura, and I don't. Yeah.
Awesome.
Happy
I will
to-
take you up on that.
Yeah, that's fine. I haven't been to one of these yet. Since I missed.
This is the first one.
Oh, it's the first one. Okay. I missed the summer. I think 2 meetings in the summer, so I wasn't sure if there had been one.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, this is our first one and it's a short one too, because we scheduled it and then realized we all had things to do at the same time. So one of those meetings. In terms of, yes,
I was
Dean.
going to say, as relates to facilitation, part of the reason I put that on is that it struck me that this was the kind of group that might, and this is to not steal any of Valera's thunder if she wants to continue to be the facilitator. Sometimes groups like this will rotate the task. It can be a kind of a headache, but it's also kind of a different approach. But I'm glad that we have Valera volunteering, and I'm just explaining part of the reason why it was on.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I just volunteered to kind of give Lauren a break because an appreciation of all the other work you're doing, Lauren. So happy to share with others. I think that can actually be a good thing, just to have share the ownership of the group.
Yeah, I like that idea too, of just rotating. How do you, not me and Alaire, feel about that? Barry's nodding, always a good sign. Ellen came off mute.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea.
So I'm going to trust that Tom is nodding with a sandwich in his mouth. I believe Kent is also excited to be on this, but I know he couldn't make it today. Oh, thumbs up from Tom. Yes. In theory, this needs to follow Robert's Rules of Order too, right?
You're muted, Dean.
Sorry. Yeah, this is a committee. It doesn't have to be as formal. If the group wants to, I think that would be something that would fall under this heading of how do you want meetings to be run, and following Robert's rules in its a whole is probably a bit much. But I think you get to write your own rules. It is a public body. So that's why we're following the open meeting laws, which means, well, there was a public notice, it was posted on our website, yada, yada. So those things are inescapable due to the fact that it's a group created by another public body. But as far as the formal running of the meeting, it's for the group to decide.
Noted. I would almost propose less formality. And maybe just we can make sure at the end we vote, and those who are in favor say yes, and who are against something have a chance to say their piece. We'll obviously work through, I think in our bylaws, we wrote a very nice sentence about how we will address that.
I just have a quick question of,
Sorry,
I want to
my
call
brain's done.
attention
Yeah.
that I'm an alternate, and so my thinking is that this group will explore and present ideas to the larger council for voting, and so really the formality of approval or not of whatever comes out of this work group would be there. That's why I sort of felt it was appropriate for me that I could still serve on this committee, but not as a voting member. So just to insert that into the mix and call attention to it.
Thank you for bringing that up. We also actually had a point of, can the public be a part of this committee? And I think that is something we can discuss today, but I think in general, we were thinking it probably makes sense for a public participation committee to allow the public onto. So even if you weren't an alternate, we would still love to have you. Yes, Barry. Oh gosh, just talk.
Let's talk. Okay. I think one of the things to decide about this, as it is with all kinds of groups like this, is whether we are task and time defined. So my understanding is that this group was convened to work on the public participation policy, because the interim one that I believe we adopted could stand some improvement. So I guess I would favor that, and it doesn't have to happen at this meeting, that we kind of identify what our goal is, so a task / goal. And in my case, I believe it's to craft call it a robust public participation policy, and that we kind of have a time-defined task, so that at the end of, when we, after 2 meetings, 3 meetings, whatever it is, over a certain period of time, we craft that policy for adoption by the council, and then essentially we go out of existence because we've accomplished our task, and that we're not an ongoing committee. That's just my preference. Open to others' thoughts.
I would agree with that, with the caveat that if the policy needs updating, maybe we like reform at some point, or the policy or the group can reform, whether it's with different members. That's another option. Other thoughts?
I guess I'd throw in there that, I've seen not necessarily just this type of policy, but a lot of policies put in place, and we do a really good job of the wording and all that kind of stuff. And then they kind of go into just normal, they're just kind of there and they're not really implemented. And so I guess one question I would bring up is the true implementation of this to make sure that it's what we're trying to accomplish. We're trying to bring public participation and to make sure that that works and make sure that happens, and so on and so forth. That could be a different committee though, or it could be Dean and his staff. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah, I had shared the section of the minutes because it seems to me, at least, it's very clear that the purpose and reason for this group is to update or to prepare a proposal for a permanent public participation policy. And you would present it all to the council, and the council would act on your proposal or recommendation. And to Tom's point, it is important to say what you mean and to mean what you say in this policy. And I would also add that you have to be able to do what you say you're going to be able to do. So it may be better to think about what's achievable. And I've worked with codes of ethics that I think are analogous to this. And because there's this tension between the things that you'd really want to do and the things that you feel you must do, they're broken out that way. So it's just, I don't want the group to commit itself to doing things it can't do. It has to be able to do the things that it says that it's going to be able to do. But you don't want to leave certain things unsaid. So sometimes you say them, but I'm just encouraging you to ultimately say them in a way where it's recognized that you aren't going to be considered a failure if you don't do them. But the things that you say that you really will do, you are going to be considered a failure if you don't do them. Does that make any sense?
Yes. To me.
Yeah, I think that was well said. That, part of the policy, it shouldn't be so big and broad and expansive that we can't meet what it's saying.
And I also think there's when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, there's things that we want to do that what I would call a baseline. We want to make sure that we're putting our messages out in places where people who don't necessarily normally see them may see them. So there's that kind of baseline. But then there's what I would call active outreach and engagement, which I would consider to kind of be above and beyond what is kind of the basics. And so I think that we want to lay the foundation of kind of making sure that we're encouraging everyone to participate, and that we're putting our messages in places where people, not the typical cast of characters may see them. And so there's that, but then there's a question of whether we're doing kind of above and beyond that. And that as Dean says, we want to make sure that if we say we're going to do something, we're really going to do it.
Right. I guess this isn't necessarily the next thing on the agenda, but what I've been thinking on for this public participation policy is kind of these two pieces of the basic. Let's make sure the information is out there in diverse and unique ways. But the information being both about the prioritization and voting piece. And this might be me dreaming, but also like, let's work on developing more project managers in our communities who can bring projects from their communities to us. Because what I've been running into, as you might have seen in past meetings, is like, hey, the DEC is making all of these calculators and prioritization things for us. What is the role of the WIC? And maybe the role of the WIC is to make sure that the projects that get to that stage are already from unique communities that we aren't necessarily always serving. And then the prioritization doesn't matter as much, because the projects we're evaluating are all really co-benefity projects. I don't know if I'm making any sense anymore.
When it comes to availability of resources and funds, and whatever bodies are promoting these as available, there's always the issue of those people with the capacity, the skills, the experience, and the paid staff to prepare applications will do so. And communities where that capacity doesn't exist will not. And so, we can weight things and we can talk about co-benefits. Is it our role, and this is again an open question, is it an open role to do active engagement? Let's say there's a dam that needs to be removed in a place where there are people without the financial means and the expertise to prepare an application. Is it the role of this body to use funding to build the capacity of people to do that, or are we strictly in the weighting and co-benefits department?
Raylan, maybe even the role of, do we have the capacity to help those people find the right community partner to partner with? And
I get that this is total, and I get that this is like, this is beyond public participation. So I don't want to stretch this too far, beyond people's level of comfort of just coming up with a public participation policy. Just kind of an open question.
I think though that's really the heart of the intent of public participation. So I think, that's not overly aspirational to, that's the real, again, the real heart of it. I think Lauren's point of finding the right community partner is important. And so I do think maybe it's not the role of this group or the WIC to build capacity within communities that might not have resources currently, but it is the role, I think, of this group to create a space for them to have a voice in both the prioritization and also the impacts of projects that we both that the WIC might prioritize as, the ranking of 1, 2, 3, who does that impact, to actively find those populations that those projects impact and get their input.
Looking at the time. Can you put the agenda back up? Dean? That one's not open.
You had mentioned previously in the agenda, previously distributed things. So I'm guessing that we have this interim policy that we can all look at and say, where can we make it better as a start?
Yes. So there's the policy that we have now, and then there had been an email with links to the NRPC public participation policy or Title IX documents, the CCRPC public participation policy, the new environmental justice law as passed, the Rejoice project that when I read through it again, realized might not be the most helpful for creating the policy, but is a good reason for having a policy. And there was also a link to 2 VLCT documents of how to, about social media, and I'm going to say a public participation policy. So there was some just like context and ideas there of trying to get at what is our task, was kind of my thought to that.
And I'll confess to not having looked at those yet. So maybe a good first step is between now and the next meeting, we all take a look at those and be able to share what we think is important to have in ours.
I think that would be a great step. And I think resending the public participation policy that we have now, Dean, if that might be possible, awesome. You can take the environmental justice BT.org off that list, unless you guys want that link. It is interesting, but it's mostly about COVID.
So I have another open question for the group, which is when I talked about this being kind of task and time defined, part of me thinks, and again, just throwing out there, part of me thinks that we should be able to come up with something by the end of the calendar year and essentially move on. Having this group continue to meet beyond that seems, unless there's real interest in kind of getting into real active engagement and outreach, part of me feels like the end of the year we should be able to get this done. Is that too soon, too late, too little, too much?
I think that sounds great. I don't think this is something that it's obviously there's many other examples and we're not the first group by far to be doing this. So we could probably do it before that if we want to.
I'd say a policy for sure should be possible by the end of the year. And if we do decide to do outreach around it, that might be back to the full BWQC for everyone to be doing once we have tasks and ideas. That being said, it is September 7th already somehow.
And again, picking up on Tom's comment that we should be clear kind of what the implementation piece of this is and who does what.
Yes.
And Dean, maybe you can answer this. And now I'm kind of going to resources. Do you have resources to support implementation? Like if we decide to do these campaigns and they cost $20,000, I'm just making that up. Is that within your, because I think that'll help us define our policy. If we can do a bunch of stuff, our policy could be bigger. If we can't do a lot of stuff and it's all volunteer outreach and all that kind of stuff, it might help us scope the direction of the policy.
So I'm going to answer your question this way, and by saying that the requirement for the council and the QUISP is to have a policy. I'm going to define a policy as language that helps you decide something when you have to make a decision. That's going to be my working definition of what a policy is. So the task is to write something that will help the council decide how to do things. It isn't necessarily a document that establishes a program. That could flow from a public participation plan, which I think is a bigger task. And it's beyond what I think is the scope of this work here. As far as a budget, the Missisquoi Basin has a luxury in that the problem is so bad, there are theoretically a lot of funds that can be brought to bear to deal with different things. So I think it's just a matter of putting, well, the other thing I'll say is that the council's job is to set policy. So if the council establishes a policy that, the bar for public participation should be really high, that policy should drive what the council does and help influence what the QUISP does. And that driving should lead to decisions about budgets. And that's where the resources will come from. I mean, I can say that, as I said earlier, the money for projects is really clear. The QUISPs have a set aside that's to help get the projects. But if the policy of the council is that we can't do projects without doing public participation in a way, then we have to make, we have to get the QUISP budget to reflect that policy. There's a very bare bones initial year one budget because we're all feeling our way along, but year two's budget should probably have a specific chunk set aside for the implementation that you said, in whatever form that's going to take. Hopefully that makes sense.
Well, I mean, that makes really good sense. I mean, a good distinction between a policy and a plan. So I think we should kind of keep our eye on that ball. But when it comes to the plan piece of it, and your point about, this region having, one of the larger challenges, when the Clean Water Fund was created years ago, and I worked for ECHO and Vermont Clean Water Network, we wrote public comments that basically criticized the fact that like 99% of the money was going towards on the ground projects and zero was going towards any kind of public education. And the agency has really relied on nonprofit organizations to do that kind of education and has not, they've done some kind of promotion and marketing and social media, but absent a big public education effort, I think it is potentially part of our role to make sure that, and it's not just necessarily general education, it might be talking, promoting the benefits of the projects that we do fund, and talking about how they can be replicated and why they're important and who benefits and things like that. So I do think that there is a place for us there. It's a little early to determine what the scope of that is, though.
Kind of our co-benefit discussion.
Yeah.
So it sounds like we're kind of all in agreement on the idea of the policy being done by January 1. And as that drives a plan or funding or the QUISP and WIC to do something different, we will see once we have this policy in place, and it's formally adopted in theory by the WIC moving forward. 2 minutes left. What are the other two agenda items? You're muted. You're still muted.
I can step in.
Schedule.
The last two were discuss the schedule and adjourn.
Oh, great. So we have one more task. Granted, we are all busy humans. I almost wonder if it makes sense to meet. It's the first Wednesday of every month from 11 to 1 is the happy go lucky time. Is that right?
Mhm.
Okay, sorry. I only have one screen today, so I can't multitask the way that I normally can.
So
So
we
that would
could
be
meet in our
October.
off months.
Right. So that'd be October 5th and then December 2nd. No, that's a real meeting. I'm in November. Jesus.
So by happy-go-lucky time, you meant the in-between meetings?
The off meeting. I thought you
Yes.
meant the meeting.
Okay. That it finally clicked.
Sorry.
Lucky, but not happy.
With the understanding that like this is a lot of work that like needs to be done between meetings. It's not necessarily like a meeting work type of thing. Okay, I saw lots of head nods. Great. So let's meet in October and December. Let's feel out November, maybe once we get to October, and see what progress we've made. At our normal, from 11, do we want to hold the full 2 hours?
I would hold it, and if we
Maybe
get it done
one.
earlier, well, I don't know. Yeah, it depends on what.
Right. I saw one.
We can farm out tasks to each of us in an hour, I think, effectively.
Yeah.
I agree.
So then my proposal for the next month is we'll send out the links and resources from before. I've got a gut feeling this group might also know about other great resources for creating a public participation policy. So if you also have resources, can you send them to Dean or just back and forth in the email thread? And for the next meeting, let's have read everything, including the participation policy that we already have, and have at least points that maybe we want to add or dive into further, to then for 2 months dive into further and develop language around for the December meeting to workshop some stuff to bring to the BWQC meeting in January. Does that work? Dea, I'm not going to remember any
And
of the
Lauren-
things I just said. Do you have it written down? At least it's recorded, I guess. Thanks.
Do we
Yes,
have
Ellen.
those? I don't see like the October 5th, did you say? I don't have that on my calendar. So can you send invitations for those 2 meetings?
Yes, I had planned to do that as a follow-up to the last meeting and I didn't get it done, but I will. It's on my
In those
list.
15 minutes? Come on.
And I
On
would
your-
just interject that, like, as we go through these materials, like to keep an eye to, it seems like one of the most important distinctions is one-way communication and two-way communication. So is it, are we promoting and informing, or are we consulting and collaborating with the public? So.
On that note, I would say read the environmental justice law before you read any of the other documents. It has a lot of purpose behind it. That is, I found, I wish I had done it in that order, and I read it last week. So, yes. All right, we're 2 minutes over again. I'm sorry. I talk as fast as I can. I know you all know it. Anything else for today? So we'll plan to meet on October 5th at 11 till noon. If for some reason we need to use that as an actual brick time, we will do something different. That's what I've got.
We should know, I mean, one of the things that you and I and Lindsay will do is figure out in the next couple of weeks, how does whatever's happening with the funding formula affect the council's need for a meeting earlier? And so we should know a couple of weeks ahead, and that would give us a chance to schedule something if we determine that we really do need to have a regular meeting.
Okay. That's good to know. All right, so Dean and Dea, you're good on the whatever I just word vomited. Thanks. Okay. Great. So you'll see an email with tasks, and I appreciate all of you for being on this committee and wanting to make a good policy. I think it's important for the policy and for a potential plan. I know I'm not reaching all the communities I need to be. So hopefully this will be a jump start in the right direction for many different groups. All right.
Excellent.
Have a
Motion to
good day.
adjourn.
Second.
Bye.
Great.
Bye.
Bye.